All right, we're back. It's part 2 of the offseason GM's Power Rankings. You got the Vikings. I've got a new backdrop. We've got the Eagles. He's got the fantastic backdrop as usual and the fantastic beard. RJ, it's good to see you.
It's great to see you. It's great to be back on a podcast. Took a couple of weeks off because there was exactly nothing going on in the NFL.
I feel like a couple people have gotten into like a set of startups, and it's been like half my leagues have been like really dead, and some have been kind of partially dead because, like you said, nothing's going on in the NFL. At the same time, the other half are in startups and really not paying attention to things. But hey, we've got a reason to pay attention again. It finally happened. After months, years, what seems like decades of anticipation, we're moving to Discord.
Yep.
It's happening. It happened.
I wasn't somebody that was overly fond of the idea initially, but I'm really happy that we did it. And I hope everybody will at least give it a chance and join and check everything out and all the nice features.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's hilarious that the reason we switched to Discord literally was the first thing that a bunch of us were asked as soon as we tried to sign on Discord. I'm not going to stay on GroupMe because it asked for my birthday. First thing Discord asked for, my birthday. So
yeah.
Either way, it's in this case to validate that I'm over the age of 13, which I might not be. Who knows? This might be a fantastic catfishing scheme, and I've got you all caught up in my web here. But nonetheless, we are on to Discord, and like you said, group of the league is happy about it. I'm ambivalent. I'm excited by what it can do, but I'm now straddling 2 different chat platforms. And for those who this helps solidify everything on Discord, good for you.
I just like some of the other interesting things that we can do to promote more engagement in the league itself. Like every Sunday during the NFL season, I'll probably like stream Red Zone in one of the general chats or something like that. We'll try to keep everybody in there and engaged as much as possible.
Nice. Yeah, again, I'm new to the benefits that it can provide beyond chat and a couple of other things, but that's why you guys are around, to help teach me the new stuff because I am an old dog. Anyway, speaking of old dogs, we're going to go back to one of the longest standing traditions in this league. On a day of rebirth and change on the chat side of things, we're going to pick up where we left off on power rankings. Now, again, we're doing a little bit different than we did in years past. This time, both RJ and I have selected where we think teams are going to finish in overall, area this year, not necessarily in terms of ranks. And we're going to go one by one after the other, saying, what team do we think is going to finish about where and why, and the person's going to put a retort out there. And, we're just going to do that until we get to 8, 10, or we just get tired.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so far. I think the last pod fostered a lot of good conversation about teams, at least on the pod. We both had varying opinions on some teams, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed hearing somebody else's opinion on criticizing another person's team.
Yep. So in terms of who did we talk about last time, and we covered 10 teams, the Steelers, the Pats, the Colts, the Jags, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Lions, the Saints, the Bucks, and the Seahawks. So 10 teams in no particular order. I think, did I pick last or did you pick last time?
I believe I picked last.
All right. So I'll go ahead and talk about our first team here. And again, the idea here is, hey, we picked 10 teams, which means, if we were doing ranks, this would be the 22nd ranked team. Now that we have, I think it's 14 or is it 16 now? 14 teams in the playoffs. 22 is just on the cusp of being competitive. So we'll call these the wildcard hopefuls, hence name of the podcast. And, like I said, we'll keep going until we get into the group that likely will make the playoffs because of their position. So I'll go to the first division that we haven't picked anybody from yet, and that's the Denver Broncos.
Okay.
So first off, This is the last division that we're taking our first team from. I think most everybody else, we have picked a team. So again, it says something about the quality of the AFC East that we're just finally getting to them. But the Broncos were famously rebuilding last year, working very hard to get that top pick, and then traded down from the 101 to the 102. And it looked like, okay, he's still in position. He's still going to grab the guy he wants, and then moved out completely, in this case, for Patrick Mahomes. So Bill has created a very interesting team where he's got some cornerstone dynasty assets, especially in a league like this, but then is trying to make it work with a lot of other things. So just going through some of the highlights of his team, we're talking Pat Mahomes and Mitch Trubisky, Raheem Mostert, Duke Johnson, Antonio Brown, Travis Fulgham, James Washington, TJ Hawkinson, and Kenny Yaboy. I know that's probably not how you pronounce his name, but that's how I choose to pronounce it because it's fun. Bill Golston, Stephen Weatherly, Shaq Barrett, Rashawn Evans, Quan Alexander, Malcolm Smith, some middle of the road corners, and Jamal Adams and Derwin James. So really strong at the quarterback, tight end, linebacker, and safety positions, which are not premium positions, but score points. So definitely probably not a wild card hopeful, but at the same time, not a bottom feeder. And especially not having his picks, you can imagine that Bill's going to keep trying to find ways to pump those rankings and get into the conversation this year.
I had Bill slightly higher, maybe like a playoff hopeful, even though still in the range of being a playoff hopeful. This division's certainly improved relatively quick, and I do like this. It was one of the divisions that I kind of thought of as more of a joke. I'd say probably 2 years ago, where it was just kind of a common sense. Chargers was going to run through it, and everybody's improved their teams, which I like. Going back to the Broncos specifically, yeah, I fondly mocked them a couple of times in previous podcasts, saying that they had built up slightly irrelevant positions, safety, things like that. But they're still going to put up a reasonable amount of points, and they have some studs at those positions. So just at this point, it's like adding depth, doing as best as you can this year, and just hoping that you can turn whatever picks you get into one or two higher end players for the year after.
And that's going to be I overuse the word interesting, so I'll go ahead and get that out of the way here. The interesting thing about this team, they don't have any 22 picks. So anything he gets is going to be acquired. So anything, like, he's basically got cornerstone pieces and a bunch of stuff that he's hoping to flip.
Right.
So,
Well, in regards to me saying moving picks, I mean next year's picks when we get new ones.
Well, we got the 23 picks already.
Oh, that's right.
So,
but yeah, I mean, at this point, I think it's one of those teams that, like, you just keep churning the bottom of your depth chart through, like, free agency, building, hopefully, like, catching a couple of good, decent players for the year, and I don't know, maybe trading all those picks for, like, one stud, and you might be, like, right in the race for the playoffs.
Yeah, again, I think
like the stud positions, like the safety and quarterback, which are normally like those positions that you address later on in a rebuild, that were addressed really early. Like he has the top end of both positions. Like he has Jamal Adams and Derwin James, who will probably put up close to 500 points by themselves, and like Mahomes isn't going to be far behind 400 or 500 points, somewhere in that range. So with like all three of them scoring absurd amount of points for their position, I think that's like they have a higher floor than a lot of other teams that would be in that same like ranking range.
Right, and again, you hit it on the head. If you look at some of the positions you're like, holy cow, that team's not going to do anything at that position. So this team's not going to be very good next year. But then when you start adding the points up, so like you say, call it 450 points from Mahomes. Say Mostert in that running back position gets him 150. Receiving core, call it 300 to 400. Hawkinson 200. You start adding it up, and you start getting to 2,000 points, pretty quick. So 2,000 points last year, just for comparison's sake. Going to unload last year's team. Would not have that much for you. Needed to get to kind of 2,500 to be low end to middle of the pack. That said, I just talked about last year's points, no jumps from anybody, and pretty quickly got to 2,000, 2,500 points for Broncos. So if Fulham comes back, if Brown can show it for a full year, it could be a fun team. It's going to steal some games. I don't think it's going to be a long-term winner. My one concern is Mahomes, again, quarterback. We saw this year is not the easiest. It is a pretty easy position to acquire if you want it. People want expensive stuff, but at some point, the market is such with everyone tanking that there's usually a surplus of quarterbacks. So, like I said, like you mentioned, it's one of the last positions you go for. That said, Mahomes,
you have the best one in the available, so you can't.
Barring something catastrophic, is going to be fantasy relevant in 6 years.
Right.
I can't say that for any linebacker or safety currently on a roster.
Yeah,
I can't say that with any level of confidence for any of that. So if you look, or even tight end. So again, I think it's a really interesting approach. I think he's going to win a couple of games and probably win a few more games than people expect. But he's going to require him to make some moves. Now, hopefully, the other side of it is, and maybe he's playing 6-dimensional chess on this, is these are the last pieces a team who's trying to win a title adds. So, team pops strong, goes 5-1 in the first 3 weeks, looks like a title contender, doesn't have a tight end. What do you get for TJ Hawkinson? Hey, team's looking really good, but doesn't really have a linebacker one. Do you get a first one of those linebackers? Has he kind of shifted his chips around in such a way that he's able to trade to contenders some of those last necessary pieces to help him with the draft next year by buying low on these players during a time when players are at the lowest and picks are at their highest, and then doing the switcheroo during the season? Or has he kind of played himself? Could be either.
Yeah, I look forward to watching how this one's going to pan out. I think we both said it on previous podcasts, but this is just the rebuilding isn't the way that we necessarily would do it, but almost all of us are intrigued to just see how it pans out because we want to see how it'll actually, turn out.
And frankly, I'm up for anything that drives activity into the league. So he's going to be hustling. He's going to be working the wire. He's going to be working trades. He's going to be doing what he can do to make this team better. And it's going to require him to do it week in, week out. So anything that drives activity is a plus in my book.
Yep.
All right. Why don't you take us to the next team here?
All right. The next one that I would have is Texans. We haven't touched on them, right?
We have not touched on Texans.
Okay. I think this team aged out. I think it was just the case of the owner holding on to basically every asset just a little bit too long until their value has diminished to relatively nothing. And this team is going to not necessarily hit rock bottom, but they are going to struggle to replicate their previous season's points outputs.
I'll agree with that. They definitely have some still cornerstone pieces. Josh Allen,
sure.
quarterback. Then let's see. Gordon should still be something at running back. I'm not sure if we're going to see Jamal take the reins there immediately. A-Rob and then Corey Davis at receiver. Tight end, your guess is as good as mine. So I agree. I think this team has aged out. I think it's going to be, can Josh Allen drag him to the first round of the playoffs and then get knocked out? Considering the powerhouse that is the AFC this year, this is not where you want to be. And like you said, some of these players were probably worth something last year, but unfortunately, another year older, and it's going to be really hard to recoup anything better than a third for a lot of this roster. When last year you probably could have gotten top 50 picks for 5 or 6 of some of these players.
Yep, and I'll put it to you this way: when I wrote down this list, I was like, you agree with the statement right now. When I wrote this down, Devondre Campbell didn't have a job.
Right.
So like there was another person with FA next to their name. So like the team looked even worse. So it has improved since the last time I put it down this low, and still, not an improvement enough to like really change things. And don't get me wrong, some of these guys that are free agents will get signed, but just the vast majority of them are like late 20s, and it's just you're right on that edge of where their production's going to fall off. And like, I love Josh Allen, but Josh Allen doesn't put up enough points to, get you to a playoff or get you to a first round win.
Right. I mean, and again, I sent an offer for Josh Allen a couple months ago. I haven't sent one recently.
I'd give up anything for Josh Allen. I think I've said that like plenty of times. Even as a Pats fan, like he's probably the most enjoyable player to watch for me. So like to have him on a team, I'd give up just about anything. But I don't think they're trading him. And
Right. So that's kind of what I was getting to. Is I could see the team making one last push for it if they got a Josh Allen package that made sense. But again, it's the salary cap side of this league is going to probably make it impossible to do something like that because, with 45 million tied up between Mark Ingram, Melvin Gordon, Corey Davis, and Allen Robinson. I'm sorry, that's 54 million if you add in Solomon Thomas, and then about 68 to 69 million if you add in Devondre Campbell. Like that doesn't give you the flexibility, from those positions, and those, except for Allen Robinson, aren't exactly movable players. So to
right.
get the space you need to add the pieces you need to give up something that you probably need as a role player, and you don't have the depth to not have that. So, there's a path here. The problem is this kind of team is really hard to rebuild because it literally means you're selling a year early at 80 cents on the dollar because it's going to be better than taking 50 cents on it next year.
Yeah.
And again, he could make the playoffs with this team. Like this is
Oh
the
yeah.
talking about. Like he's probably a playoff team with this roster right now, but it would take a stroke of luck / Josh Allen literally, digging down the entirety of the AFC for him to go further in the first round.
Oh, if every single one of these players puts up point totals comparable to what they did last year, the point total sitting next to their names right now, this team's going to do great. Going to do fine. They won't even have to worry about making it through the wild card. They'll probably breeze through that round of the playoffs. But I just don't think that many players are going to I think they have just so many players that won't replicate the same season that it's just.
No, I think that's fair. All right, I'll take us back to the NFC and talk about the team that I was almost, the team that I was going to be until right before the start of our draft. I made the first trade in league history by trading the rights to the 49ers franchise for the rights to the Vikings franchise. Why did I do it? Because I was 49ers in every league. And it's kind of nice to have a change every once in a while. Plus,
That's fair.
Now I put Vikings fans like Sean, a.k.a. Washington football team, and one of our fearless leaders, Chris, into positions where, they don't want to cheer against me because they're Viking fans, but they want to cheer against me. Anyways, let's talk about the 49ers.
Yeah.
So
No
we'll just start.
starting quarterback.
Well, again, we made this argument earlier in the offseason, and as the offseason goes on, it looks like a less and less good argument. Um, the intention appears to be to give Andy Dalton the first shot at starting quarterback for the Bears. Everything coming out of practice is Justin Fields is coming for that job like a freight train out of hell. So does that mean Andy Dalton can get the 49ers through the first 3 weeks as a starting quarterback before they have to figure out what they're doing? Or is the time now to go get a quarterback who's going to be a starter? Again, up to Andrew, but I think we would both say Andy Dalton's a far riskier proposition now than we thought he was right after the draft.
Yeah, I'd also say the idea of going to get a quarterback probably should have been done a few months ago, because all of the tanking teams that don't want quarterbacks have pretty much gotten rid of their quarterbacks at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Steelers haven't gotten rid of Matt Ryan. That's probably the only thing that they could do.
Right. And again,
maybe,
they've got $22 million. If they, if it was Andy Dalton and a first, a couple picks, maybe all their picks for Matt Ryan, who knows? Maybe that gets it done.
Right. But as it stands right now, yeah. I mean, I love their tight ends, but tight ends don't get you to the playoffs or really win you games for that matter.
Well, here's the thing. I love the receiving core. I love it. If I was starting a team or if I was running a Madden franchise, like this would be on my receiving core. That said, this is not a good fantasy receiving core.
The vast majority. So I have no issues with any of the players on the team, particularly. I'd want almost all of them on my team, but not as such prominent roles as they will be forced to play on this team.
Yep. And then you get to the defense, and look, the linebackers are solid, but outside of that, you're in some trouble.
Right. Love the linebackers.
Yeah.
Hate everything else.
Yeah. So again, doesn't have the quarterback. Probably might be set up great for a best ball receiving core. Great tight ends, no defense. If he wasn't playing the NFC West, we probably would have talked about him the last podcast, but instead we're talking about him now.
Yep.
All right. You are up, sir.
All right. We'll go to the AFC on this one, and I'm looking at the Jets.
That was my last team in this tier too, so well done.
I think they have some. So like this is one of the more interesting ones. Like they have what you would consider a stable quarterback. Goff doesn't get injured too often. He's somebody you can pretty much count on. Is going to play a full season, give or take. At this point, I don't think that's a guarantee, but I think previous years it was. But like outside of Devontae Adams, there's a lot of like leaves you wanting a lot on offense, and then the defense is just bits and pieces of like some good players or were good players in the past, but just not enough to like cobble together like reasonable points.
Yeah, I think this is a very similar situation to what you were saying with the Texans. Last year, you look at Santi and the Jets. I think maybe it was 2 years ago. He basically has built around, hey, let me get the 49ers running backs here, and then Damian Williams, thinking, okay, just having that backfield on the cheap is going to get me enough running back production to give me what I need. Right. Gravy. Brandon Cooks has been hated on. Devontae Adams is a stud. And if Evan Ingram could ever become half the tight end he's intended to be, that's a very serviceable offense. The defense is falling off. And last year was the time for Santi to blow this up. training Devontae at the height of his powers, um, selling out midseason on Brandon Cooks and getting probably a first at least for him, getting it out of a lot of these guys when he still could at peak value would have been great, but it requires Santi to actually do the legwork. And again,
Right.
he's my doubles partner. I love him. He's a great guy, but he's kind of gone passive in this league in a lot of cases, waiting for offers to come to him, or if he likes an offer, comes back so far over the top that it's really tough to counter.
Right. Which we all get into that rut every once in a while. I know
Mhm.
I've been uh, I haven't sent out as many offers as I would have liked this off season, just because you lose the fire to send out so many offers.
Or you have a
Um,
million other things going on. Like it happens.
yep. But I do agree this is one that was kind of sat on a little bit too long. I know he didn't have Cam Hayward the vast majority of the time. He got him probably last year, but he was the type of player that he was already aging out when he got him. But like holding on to like Marcus Golden, like that hurts because he's not going to be worth anything at this point. When it was probably 2 years ago, you could have gotten almost a Darius Smith type value out of him because he was another one of those like comparable players, big linebacker that got you a bunch of sacks.
Yep. So yeah, now it's what can you do with Jared Goff, who is a starting quarterback on a reasonable deal, which I think is something that people are going to be coming after.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do with Devontae Adams? Can you get a bag for him still? Probably, but again, with a large contract, that's going to be tougher. And then what can you do with Evan Ingram or Anthony Frisker? I think the Julio trade makes that a little bit less desirable of an asset, but it's still something that people should be coming after because it's a tight end on the cheap.
So I think this is one that's fairly discussable. What is Devonte Adams' value at this point? Because I mean his contract isn't completely awful. I mean, yeah, it is. Let's be honest. I don't want to pay any wide receiver anything near or over 15 million probably. So I don't necessarily like the contract. But if there was one wide receiver that I was going to pay like an absurd amount of money, I think it's still Devontae, right?
So here's yes, but I liken this to trading in hockey, where you'll see teams decide not to try and acquire certain players during the season because they don't really have the space for them. They'll acquire them in the offseason when they know what their cap situation is and they can build around that as them being a big cap hit in the middle of their balance sheet. That's when you make a Devontae Adams deal. At the beginning of this offseason, when picks are involved, when people are flush with cap space, when they aren't constrained by, okay, how do I make this work within the cap? Right now, it's incredibly difficult because, again, people have space, but people don't have 20 million in space just laying around, especially the contenders. So in a lot of these cases, you're trying to get younger. You're trying to get picks. You're not trying to acquire pieces to continue building here. But the problem is the value of those pieces is going to be low. So you're trying to make a deal happen when the person you want to give this to doesn't have cap space or the items you want, but the things they can give you aren't necessarily things you want for your rebuild. So now you have to go through 3 or 4 steps to actually get to where you need to get to with breaking the pieces down. Whereas in the off season, you make one deal and you get there.
Okay.
So that said, in this year's draft, I'd say higher or lower in the 4th pick for Devontae Adams. If, again, not going to happen because obviously taking Zach Wilson makes sense for this, although I guess Zach Wilson going to a Jets homer might be really intriguing. If there was another quarterback other than Taysom Hill on Seahawks roster that he could trade Zach Wilson for Devontae Adams, I'm not sure who says no.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just trying to like get an idea for. I mean, I'm not going after him, but somebody else might want to. So it's something that we should discuss. I I don't know if the fourth necessarily would be his value. I feel like that might be a little high. Um,
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's look who went five. Like five
uh,
was Najee Harris,
right.
six was Jamar Chase.
I'm just talking about it in the context that we're looking at for like this year. But
Right.
I think a pick of that roundabout that isn't unreasonable. I think somewhere between like a mid round first and a late second, like something like that type of a package should get it done. Um, just kind of getting an idea because I don't know if anybody's really taken a run at trying to offer for Devontae this offseason. So maybe one of the contending teams that's listening might want to take a shot at it.
Yeah, I think again, he's worth taking a shot at.
Yep, I agree. I also like Brandon Cooks. I kind of looked over him on the first go around, but I do agree with your statement before that he probably is worth a first. He might still be worth that depending on like where that first falls.
Yep. All right, so let's see. Back to me. So that takes care of that second tier I had. Oh no, it doesn't. There's one other team that I haven't talked about that I probably should have already, but
Okay.
we can talk about it now. It's the Giants. Um,
Yep.
been in the rebuild process for the better part of last year and into this year. Made some smart acquisitions of the Washington quarterback room to attempt to try and flip that for some values. Um, but being the league set up the way it is, very difficult to trade a $30 million Ryan Fitzpatrick and a $10 million Taylor Heineke until an injury happens or a lot of injuries happen. Um, that said, he's clearly on the road to rebuilding here. Acquired Tua. He's got Tua's presumable number one target in Will Fuller. Picked up Javonte Williams in the draft last year. Kadarius Toney as well at wide receiver. Um, Mark Andrews was on the cheap, but with the extension, he's a little bit more expensive. Um, and then a couple of other um, offshoots from my team who are young and potential building blockish materials, and a couple that probably going to be flipped by the time the Giants are ready to roll again. But that said, this is not a team that is ready to compete in the NFC East. They've probably still got plenty of moves to make before they are ready, but from a where they finish standpoint, I feel this is probably the range they finish, just based off the quality of players they have on the roster.
Yeah. Probably gonna end up finishing a little bit higher just because there's some worse teams in their division. Um, but I think the teams like a year out of like really competing or at least like eyeing contending. The one thing that I do like is they kept their wide receiver room. Though productive, they kept it very small. Um, so they're not going to have like any extra. If somebody scores 0 points, you're not going to have some bench guy scoring three and screwing up your points. Same with the running backs. Keep the depth very thin so you don't have a whole lot of points.
Yep, and I mean, we did our share of mock drafts, and I think I had Kadarius Coney going in the middle of the first to you most of the time. So
Yep.
I'm not going to hate on him as a player. I think there's some good pieces here. I just don't think they're there yet. So in terms of where I put them in our tiers, I think I had them falling in the rebuilding tier because I think that's what they would say they are right now. But that being said, they're a good enough team. They're probably going to end up in the playoff hunt if they don't turn over a little bit more of their roster. And I don't know if that's what they want or don't want, but we'll see. We'll see what the Giants end up doing.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, a lot of agreeing there. Darn it. Pick somebody that I'm not going to agree with here, so we can have some longer discussions.
So we're going out west again. We're going to Arizona.
Ooh, okay.
Another lackluster quarterback room, because that seems to be the NFC West's MO. Other than the Rams, who actually have a real quarterback, everybody else doesn't, or at least not one that will immediately be a starter. So the rest of the team is just a who's who of guys that were either really good backups a couple of years ago or are not so good backups now. I'm kind of shocked that we went this far without mentioning them, but
So yeah,
we're at them now.
I mean, it's kind of the same conversation. How long do you expect Jimmy to, as with the 49ers, how long do you expect Jimmy to hold on? And that's a direct correlation to where does this team finish. If Jimmy holds on for the season, maybe they can sneak into the playoffs. If he doesn't, pull the cord, time to get out. That said, still has Jamar Chase, has DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to be in a similar difficult situation like Santi with the Jets in moving Hopkins. But the problem is Hopkins is $10 million more expensive than Devontae Adams. So I don't know if I would move Rashad Bateman for him, that being DeAndre Hopkins, based off of the contract difference. That's the level of impact I think that means. I don't know whether I'm just being way too sheepish on my contracts or what, but to make $26 million additional dollars to make that deal fit is really hard to do.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Alternatively, I think inside the season is where you get the most value for one of these type of players when you're not considering just contract involved, just because you end up taking like age and dynasty value out of it, and you want rest of season value, and people will always pay for the premium name. Yeah, you just got to find a trade partner that has, I don't know, a $30 million defensive end or a $15 million defensive tackle that they bought in free agency all willy nilly.
So you're saying he's going to the Colts?
Maybe. Colts are a potential. Just somebody that spent excessively in free agency. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about that like it's a bad thing.
No.
You always spend a little crazy, and either get a good value or at least something with like trade value that you could flip for more reasonable contracts, or at least you hope. Yeah, with this team, I think it's a complete teardown. Like you get whatever value you can, because like Jimmy's like it's inevitable Jimmy's not going to be valuable at some point. So like I don't know, you try to extract whatever value you can out of that fantastic contract. But like the rest of it, you just get what you can. Hopefully, hold on to Chase, and he doesn't like burden you too much as far as points. And you just hope for the future. Because if I'm not mistaken, they still have their picks. They're not too much of a frequent trader, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they have all of their picks are intact. So yeah,
That's true. All right. So I'm gonna go to the completely other side of the world here.
okay.
AFC East.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Never mind. Wrong. AFC South. I'm gonna finish our first division. I'm coming back for the Titans.
Ooh, okay.
So I'm in kind of the. So let me just count here right now. We've got 3, 5, 6, 9, 11, 14, 16, 17 teams. So we're really at that point where one of these teams is going to miss the playoffs. Now, obviously, not all 4 teams of the AFC South can miss the playoffs. I get that. I'm not an idiot. That said, we're going on strength of.
They should, but go ahead.
And if I were to say, hey, the top 7 teams in the AFC make it, I think the Titans would miss. That said, let's take a look at this team real fast. Kirk Cousins should be a starting quarterback for the Titans and put up starting quarterback numbers if he stays, again, assuming he stays healthy. Christian McCaffrey, handles all manner of sins, again, assuming he stays healthy. Julio Jones and Michael Pittman, very solid. Will Disley, I think, got a little bit of competition with Gerald Everett and a few other tight ends in Seattle, but when he's been healthy, has shown out. And he's got some decent pieces, although nothing that really knocks my socks off on defense outside of Jeremy Chin. But that said, this is the best team in the South. I just, again, much like the Bills, I don't think this team's getting out of the first round.
Yeah, I agree with that. Kirk Cousins, probably, stable quarterback. McCaffrey. I'm really sad that LaMichael Pirines' value just completely disappeared now that Michael Carter seems to be the more capable running back in New York. And then like Julio Jones. This team's not like terrible. Like this really is one of those teams that should be on the cusp. Like especially given the division that they're in, because like if he makes a move to like solidify, I don't know. I'm not going to say defensive end because that's going to be something that we always harp on. The vast majority of teams just don't have good defensive ends. But if they could build out their depth and linebacker and maybe like add depth at tight end 1 and like leave Will Disley as like the tight end 2, like I think this team's pretty good and has like a good nod to the future also.
No, I think that's fair. I think that, wide receiver 3 is probably something you want to look at. You mentioned the end. Hopefully, Ronald Blair gets the love from Robert Saleh in New York, and depth at linebacker, which is not something you normally say.
This podcast could actually be called "These are the teams that need defensive ends and tight ends."
Yeah, but that's less of a fun title. Yeah, I mean, kind of like they say in The Good Place. All we need is an offense, a defense, some special teams, and some rule changes, and we're right there.
Yep, and this team is a contender.
Yep. Again, not a bad team, but I think this is our first playoff team, quote unquote. But I think they're definitely in that one and done category.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't realize they have Jeremy Chin at safety. Yeah, get rid of every safety and just run him. He's a freak.
Yeah. All right. Back to you.
All right. My next one is going to have to be like now these are good teams. Or relatively good teams. So like you start looking through and you're like you have to change your thought process. Like you're no longer like hunting for the terrible teams. You're looking for the teams that are just going to barely make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs. We're going out west again.
Okay. I'm noticing a West Coast bias.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. But so this team I think is a good team. Really, really well built team. They just lack a lot of depth on offense, and that's that I feel like is going to be a downfall. Back to the same talking point: tight end, defensive end, non-existent. What do you know? Those are the positions that you just need to get better at if you want to go deep into the playoffs. But everything else is perfectly fine with this team. Yeah, I'm not overly thrilled with the linebackers, but you have Jerome Baker, so you can never be too worried.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really enjoy the defensive tackles. Like I don't think you need that many roster spots on defensive tackles, but you're probably going to have like a 12-point plus score every week, and that's kind of cool.
Yep, definitely kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. You've already seen Kansas City start to break things up a little bit and moving Deshaun Watson for pieces. I think the thought of giving up A.J. Brown or Justin Jefferson, especially on those contracts, is probably a non-starter for him. Although it would be really interesting to see what the bag would come back as for AJ Brown. Like,
Probably a fully flushed out, like depth wise, like offense. And that would actually do him a lot of good. But the the appeal of having like a big name like AJ Brown might just be too good to like make that trade.
right. And again, I'm just trying to think of a team that might make sense. And again, like you, I have not made as many trades here, so I don't quite have all of the rosters at the tip of my fingers. But if the Jags they offered Derrick Henry, DJ Chark, and Joey Bosa in a package for AJ Brown and probably something.
Probably gonna need picks. Let me check what they have for picks. And they have two first rounders next year. Theirs and yours actually. So
So yeah, if he
they
offers
can
AJ Brown and my first for that package, I mean, does that get it done?
I mean, it furthers both teams in like what they want to do. I'd imagine. Still don't really know the intentions of Jags, but if the Jags want to go towards the bottom like they probably should be in a rebuilding fashion, then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you definitely want to make that trade, and I think that's a good value.
So, you know, not as in depth as some of the stuff we throw in here sometimes, but at least a starting point for some discussions. Um, let's do one or two more each here.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay in my South, but I'm going to jump to the NFC and talk about the Panthers.
Okay.
Um, this is a team, again, that during the offseason, we were all kind of just stunned. Like, holy crap, James is playing seven-dimensional chess. He's acquiring picks. He's picking up stuff. He's going to have, 7 picks in the first round plus what's already a relatively decent team. This thing's going to be built out, and he's going to have a juggernaut. Then he started buying players. I can't say that this is a bad team. I can't say this is a great team. What I can say is this team has 48, 49, maybe $50 million tied up at the quarterback position. And, Stafford, I think, is a good thing. But, 36 million of it, I can't figure out why it's there. Running back, again, Damian Harris, and the rest are question marks. Receiver, you've got Mike Evans, KJ Hamler, and Tyler Boyd. And again, should be solid. But again, there's just so many question marks on this team that had he had stuck with his process and made picks and built around the team that way, I think he'd be looking at a much better situation. Wouldn't be competing, but a much better situation than he is now. Right now, it's some pieces of the team are ready to roll. Some pieces are in full rebuild. And straddling that is a really tough thing to do.
Yeah, that's how you get stuck in the middle. The one positive is he's an active owner that's always trying to make moves. So like when you're a middle team that's actually active, you'll never get stuck in that spot. You'll either actively tank or actively get better. But yeah, I agree. Like some positions are just like, wow, that's really terrible. And with the amount of picks that he had earlier in the offseason, you kind of look at it and you go, probably should have addressed that instead of quarterback. But maybe this is one of the teams that gives off a quarterback to one of the NFC West teams that's in need of it. Like I don't know. They don't necessarily have the depth, but they might have the one marquee player that'll help them. Still be lacking in the running back room, but if DeAndre Hopkins got added to that those wide receivers, that would be pretty nice and probably almost negate the lack of points at running back or potential points, given a bad week or two.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I'm looking over the defense right now. Yeah, it's another one of those situations where it's predominantly depth. Like you still need those like marquee players. So he has picks. He has like an extra first, an extra second, things like that. Um, so like if he's actively moving those, I'm sure he can find trade partners and he can improve that team.
All right, so let's see. That means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 13. So why don't you do one more, and then I'll leave us 12 for the next time we jump on here.
All right, sounds good. Let me mark off Panthers. So my last one is going to be. Oh no, we stay in the same. Stay in the West again. The Raiders.
You had me thinking that we were going to finish off the NFC West. It's like, what? But I'm almost still as
No.
shocked with this selection. So show your work, young man.
Okay. Um. So partially, this is. I think the Chargers take the division, and we're getting down to the point where there's only 13 teams that we can pick through at this point. So like, not saying this team is terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but they are. If you have to start picking out of these teams, they're probably the worst one. Um, Solid at just about every position on offense. Wide receiver, I'd probably want like another prominent player. I don't know if Robbie Anderson is really like like consistent wide receiver two, or the type of wide receiver two that you want in like a contending team. Tight end probably needs to get better, but that's about it. Like that's like extremely lacking. Cornerback needs depth, but that's one of those the very last thing that you address before week one starts. And defensive tackle, but like defensive tackles, just like cornerback in that scenario, that you can address it later and still be fine.
So I'm going to go ahead and make a confession here. I
Yeah.
think I was trying to look for a hot take when I put these rankings together, and I had the Raiders winning the West. And then I just took a fresh look at the Raiders, and I shouldn't drink and make rankings.
Well, the only thing is, like, the person that they have to beat out for the West is a top 4, top 5 team. So like that's my only issue.
And that's the thing. It's the depth is going to be the problem. I think you hit it on the head. I think having Rodgers and Love make sure he's got a solid quarterback, hopefully for next year. Mixon again. If it's going to happen, it's got to happen next year.
I love the idea of having Mixon this year, mostly because the season hasn't started and we're all on the hype train again.
Yep. I agree. One more receiver would be good, but again, I think he can kind of go in at that wide receiver 3 level rather than up top. I think Harrison Bryant makes a leap, so I like what he's got there. I think he's got good pieces on defense. He just needs more. He just doesn't have. I think he could hang with Matt on players 1 through 10, maybe 1 through 15. It's 11 through 22 or 15 through 22 where Matt just takes the division.
This team reminds me a lot of the Giants team that won 2 years ago.
If you're saying I need to trim Zadarius Smith.
No, I think he has his Zadarius. I think he has a more consistent Zadarius with Darius Leonard.
Fair.
But yeah, I think it's one of those teams that like you look at it and like on defense, you're like, I want more depth. Like I feel like if anybody gets injured, like this team gets a couple extra losses that they didn't need. Mm-hmm. But if this team stays healthy and like Darius Leonard decides to go on a tear towards the end of the season, this is one of those that like you see in the, final 4 teams left standing and you're like, wow, they got hot at the right time.
Right. No, I mean, absolutely. And I don't think he's done making moves. I think he's been trying to move some picks for depth to try and improve that back end of his starters with picks that kind of make sense there. He's not going to necessarily go for the studs, but contributing players. So I don't think he's done, but nonetheless, as it stands right now, Matt's in front of him by, I'd say, a little bit more than a nose, but there's still plenty of time to close that gap.
Yep. Yeah, it's really nice. It's one of those things. Like he'll take one of those picks and like the Josh Adams roster spot and find like a new running back.
Mhm.
But also, if you go into a week with having like Josh Adams as your fourth running back, you're not, the sky isn't falling either.
Right.
So, like that's the thing that I like about his team. The depth could be better, but it also could be a lot worse.
Yep, absolutely. So we've done the impossible. We've done a rankings podcast in under an hour.
Nice.
So for those who said it couldn't be done, we did it. For those who pounded the over thinking, there's no way, guess what, Vegas? You win every once in a while. But, it's been fun. We want to make sure we save some content for the next one. We've got 12 more teams to talk about. Three in the AFC North, Bengals, Browns, and Ravens. Two in the AFC East, Dolphins and Bills. Chargers, then Redskins. Three from the North, the Packers, Bears, and Vikings. The Falcons, and the Rams. So I think we're getting to that cream of the crop, like you said, and it'll be interesting to see how some of these line up, especially at the top, and see who gets the luckily cursed team of being picked number one. I haven't gone back to check the work to see if that actually curses a team or not, but you
Oh,
know,
I mean, I can tell you mine because they won the championship last year, and I don't, unless some team got ridiculously better than them, I don't think that they should be ranked anywhere outside of number one.
see, that's what we call in the business a tease. So again, for those who joined, thank you very much. I think we've just had one viewer this entire time. Was kind of an impromptu announced pod, but it is kind of the dead season. So sometimes that means longer between pods. Sometimes that means longer between trades. Sometimes that means fewer viewers. But you make do with what you got. But RJ, it's always fun to be on the mics with you. Be well, my friend, until the next time we jump on here. And God knows what it's going to look like behind me at that point.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for joining and have a good night.